My name is Ronald, 32 years old, and I never thought my first property would become the battleground for family drama. After 3 years of overtime shifts and budgeting, I finally owned something that was truly mine. My downtown apartment was my sanctuary, my achievement. Then I went on that 2-week vacation to Hawaii, my first real break in years. Coming home should have felt good. Instead, I found strangers living in what used to be my space. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear how I fought back. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. My childhood home was small but comfortable until my parents' marriage fell apart when I was 12. The divorce was messy, with my mom Barbara and dad Richard constantly at odds. I learned early on to be self-sufficient, while my younger sister Amanda, who was 6 at the time, became the focus of both parents' attention and sympathy. She was the baby who needed protecting, while I was expected to be strong and act like a man. Despite the family turmoil, I maintained good grades and won a partial scholarship to the University of Illinois. College wasn't easy. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore while carrying a full course load in computer science. Even with the scholarship, I graduated with $45,000 in student loans that I'm still paying off today. My first job out of college was at a startup that paid poorly but gave me valuable experience. After 2 years of eating ramen and sharing an apartment with 3 other guys, I landed a better position as a software developer at TechNow, a mid-sized company developing business applications. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and for the first time, I could imagine having financial stability. I had a clear goal: save enough for a down payment on my own place. No more roommates, no more landlords raising the rent every year. For 3 years, I lived frugally. I drove the same used Honda Civic I'd had since college. I brought lunch to work every day, instead of eating out with colleagues. I picked up freelance coding projects on weekends for extra cash. Every bonus went straight into my down payment fund. Finally, at 29, I had enough for a 20% down payment on a modest 2-bedroom apartment in an older building in Lincoln Park. It wasn't fancy or new, but it had character, high ceilings, original crown molding, and hardwood floors that needed refinishing, but had beautiful grain underneath years of wear. The day I signed the mortgage papers was the proudest day of my life. I remember looking around the empty rooms and thinking, "This is mine. I earned this." The first month was a blur of renovation projects. I took 2 weeks of vacation to refinish those hardwood floors myself, spending hours on my knees sanding and applying polyurethane. I painted the walls in colors I chose after weeks of deliberation: a warm gray for the living room, a deep blue for the bedroom. I installed new light fixtures and cabinet hardware in the kitchen. My grandfather had been a serious record collector, and when he passed away during my second year of college, he left me his entire vinyl collection, over 500 albums, mostly classic rock and jazz. I built custom shelving along one wall of the living room, specifically designed to display and store these records. Each weekend, I'd carefully clean a few albums and organize them alphabetically. The second bedroom became my home office. I splurged on a standing desk and ergonomic chair since I often brought work home or did freelance projects. I mounted my 3 monitors on adjustable arms and ran the cables through the wall for a clean look. My coding books lined the built-in bookshelves that I constructed from reclaimed wood. Over the next 3 years, that apartment became an extension of myself. Every corner reflected my choices, my effort, my taste. Friends would comment on how the place felt like me when they visited, and I took that as the highest compliment. My relationship with Amanda had grown distant over the years. While I was working multiple jobs and saving for my future, she dropped out of community college after 2 semesters and cycled through a series of retail and restaurant jobs, never staying in one place for more than a few months. She'd call when she needed money for rent or to fix her car, and I usually helped when I could, though it sometimes frustrated me that at 26, she still hadn't developed financial stability or independence. My mother Barbara remained as involved in Amanda's life as ever, often making excuses for her job hopping and financial troubles. "She's still finding herself," Mom would say. "Not everyone can be as focused as you, Ronald." I detected a hint of criticism in these comments, as if my responsibility and planning were character flaws rather than strengths. My father, Richard, remarried and moved to Indianapolis. Our relationship was cordial but distant. He'd call on holidays and my birthday, and we'd have awkward conversations about sports and weather. He was always quick to ask about work, but rarely about my personal life or well-being. This past spring, I led a major project at work that resulted in a significant new contract for TechNow. As a reward, my boss approved a 2-week vacation, my first real time off in 5 years. I decided to go to Hawaii, specifically the island of Kauai, where I could hike, snorkel, and most importantly, disconnect from email and Slack notifications. Before leaving, I meticulously prepared my apartment. I cleaned everything, even moving the refrigerator to sweep behind it. I arranged for my neighbor Carlos to water my plants twice a week. I set timers for the lights in different rooms to deter potential break-ins. I emptied the refrigerator of perishables and took out all the trash. As an emergency precaution, I gave my mother a spare key with strict instructions. "This is only for actual emergencies. Fire, flood, that kind of thing. Don't worry so much," she had said. "Just go enjoy your vacation. You worked too hard anyway." Those words would come back to haunt me in ways I could never have imagined. After 14 days of Hawaiian paradise, I returned to Chicago, feeling refreshed and ready to get back to my routine. The flight had been long, with a 3-hour layover in Los Angeles, and by the time the taxi dropped me at my building, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted but content, already mentally planning to sleep in my own bed and then make my special Sunday breakfast in the morning. I nodded to the night doorman, Frank, who seemed to give me an odd look as I passed, but I was too tired to think much of it. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer than usual, my body heavy with travel fatigue but my mind already settling into the comfort of being home. When I reached my door and inserted my key, something felt off. The key didn't slide in smoothly like it usually did. I had to wiggle it slightly before it turned. Still, the lock opened, and I pushed the door inward. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Unfamiliar perfume mixed with new paint. Then the visual shock. In the entryway, where I'd hung a vintage Chicago transit map, there was now a large mirror with a white ornate frame. The hardwood floor I'd so painstakingly refinished was covered with a plush white carpet. For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd somehow entered the wrong apartment. I stepped back to check the number on the door. 412. My apartment. Heart pounding, I moved further inside. The gray walls of my living room were now a bright, almost aggressive pink. My carefully arranged bookshelves had been painted white and rearranged to hold decorative objects and framed photos I didn't recognize. My leather couch was gone, replaced by a tufted velvet sectional in a pale blush color. Then I heard a noise from the kitchen and turned to see my sister Amanda standing there in pajamas, holding a glass of water, looking as surprised to see me as I was to see her. "Ronald, you're back early," she exclaimed. "Early?" "My flight was on schedule," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm despite the hurricane of confusion in my head. "Amanda, what are you doing here? What happened to my apartment?" She laughed nervously. "Surprise! I moved in while you were gone. Mom thought it would be nice for me to have a fresh start, and since you have all this space—" "Moved in?" I repeated, struggling to process her words. "Without asking me? And what happened to my furniture? My things?" "Oh, don't worry," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We put most of your stuff in storage. The building manager was super helpful. He let us use that extra storage unit in the basement." My knees felt weak. I looked around, trying to identify anything familiar in what used to be my carefully curated home. My grandfather's record collection was nowhere to be seen. "Where are my records?" I demanded, my voice rising. "They're safe," Amanda assured me. "We reframed some of the cooler album covers as art. The rest are in storage." Those shelves were taking up so much space, and honestly, who listens to vinyl anymore? I rushed to where my record shelving had been, finding instead a small console table with a few framed album covers above it, not displayed with the care and protection needed for valuable vinyl, just slapped into cheap frames with push pins. "You had no right," I said, my shock giving way to anger. "This is my home, my property." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. Mom said you wouldn't mind helping me out. My lease ended, and the new place I wanted wasn't available yet. It's just temporary." "Temporary? You remodeled my entire apartment." "We improved it," she corrected. "Those colors you chose were so dark and depressing. The contractors did an amazing job brightening everything up." "Contractors?" I felt like I was going to be sick. "You brought strangers into my home to change things without my permission?" I pushed past her to check my bedroom, finding it transformed with floral wallpaper and a new white furniture set. My sturdy oak bed frame that I'd saved for months to buy was gone, replaced by a metal canopy bed with fairy lights strung across the top. The worst was yet to come. When I opened the door to my home office, I found it completely dismantled. The standing desk was gone. My monitor setup had disappeared. The bookshelves I'd built by hand were removed entirely. In their place was a vanity table with a lighted mirror and a clothing rack filled with Amanda's wardrobe. "Where's my work equipment?" I asked, my voice now dangerously quiet. "In storage," Amanda repeated, as if that made everything okay. "We packed it all really carefully. I needed a closet space, and since you do most of your work at the office anyway, I discovered that my mother had given Amanda the spare key I'd left for emergencies. Within days of my departure for Hawaii, Amanda had brought in contractors who repainted, installed carpet over my hardwood floors, and refinished my kitchen cabinets in a glossy white that was already showing fingerprints. My carefully chosen furniture had been removed to the building's storage unit, where it was haphazardly packed with no protection against moisture or damage. Many of my personal possessions had been boxed up without any system or labeling. "Mom thought it would be a nice surprise," Amanda explained, seemingly oblivious to my growing fury. "She paid for everything as a gift for both of us." "Both of us?" I repeated incredulously. "Well, you needed to update this place anyway," she said with a shrug. "Those old hardwoods were so last century, and that blue in your bedroom was way too dark." I was speechless. 3 years of creating my personal sanctuary had been erased in 2 weeks, without my knowledge or consent, by my own family. I pulled out my phone to call my mother, but Amanda grabbed my arm. "It's after midnight," she said. "You can't call Mom now. We can sort this out in the morning." That's when I noticed another toothbrush in the bathroom, men's products in the shower. "Is someone else living here too?" As if on cue, a man emerged from my bathroom, wearing only pajama bottoms. "Hey, babe, who are you talking to?" he asked Amanda before noticing me. "Oh, hey, you must be the brother. Jake, this is Ronald," Amanda introduced casually. "Ronald, this is Jake, my boyfriend." Jake extended his hand, which I ignored. "You moved your boyfriend in too?" I was nearly shouting now. "His roommate situation wasn't working out either," Amanda explained. It just made sense. I discovered that not only had Amanda moved herself in, but she had already changed the utilities into her name and received mail at my address, clearly attempting to establish residency. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "Both of you. Now." Amanda's expression changed from casual dismissal to indignation. "We have nowhere to go tonight. You can't just throw us out on the street." "Watch me," I said, pulling out my phone again to call the police. "Fine. Call Mom first," Amanda challenged. "See what she has to say about this." I did call my mother despite the late hour. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Ronald, are you okay?" "It's after midnight." "No, Mom, I'm not okay," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I just got home from vacation to find Amanda and her boyfriend living in my completely remodeled apartment. Care to explain? There was a pause, then a sigh. "Oh, you're home already? I thought you weren't back until tomorrow." Her response made my blood boil. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but disappointment that I'd caught them before they were ready. "I need you to come over here right now," I demanded. "At this hour? Ronald, don't be ridiculous. We can talk about this in the morning." "No, Mom. Now. You did this, you fix it." After some back and forth, she finally agreed to come over. While waiting for her arrival, I surveyed more of the damage to my home. The kitchen cabinets I'd carefully selected had been painted white without proper preparation, resulting in drips and uneven coverage. My collection of chef's knives was missing entirely. The refrigerator had been filled with unfamiliar foods and alcohol. When my mother arrived 40 minutes later, she swept in, as if arriving for a housewarming party rather than a confrontation. "Ronald, honey, welcome back. How was Hawaii?" she asked, trying to hug me. I stepped back. "What have you done to my home?" I asked. Barbara glanced around with a satisfied smile. "Doesn't it look wonderful? So much brighter and more modern now. Those dark colors you chose were really bringing down the energy of the space." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You had no right to change anything in my apartment. This is my property. I paid for it. I own it." She waved her hand dismissively, just as Amanda had done earlier. "Don't be so possessive, Ronald. Your sister needed a place to stay. Her landlord sold the building, and she had to be out by the 1st of the month. What was she supposed to do? Find another apartment? Stay with you? Literally anything other than taking over my home without permission. It's temporary," my mother insisted, "just until she gets back on her feet." "And how long will that be?" I demanded. My mother and Amanda exchanged a glance. "Well," my mother began cautiously, "we were thinking maybe 6 months or so would give her time to save for a security deposit on a new place." 6 months? I was incredulous. "You expected me to be displaced from my own home for half a year?" "Not displaced," Amanda jumped in. "We thought we could share. There are 2 bedrooms after all." "Share? You've completely taken over. Where would I sleep? Where would I work?" "We thought you could stay with your father for a while," my mother suggested, as if this was a perfectly reasonable solution. "Or you could sleep on the sofa bed when you need to be here. It folds out." I called my father, hoping he might be the voice of reason. Instead, he sided with them. "Family helps family, Ron," he said over the speakerphone. "Amanda's going through a rough patch. It won't kill you to be generous for a few months." "Dad, they changed the locks. They painted over everything. They put my belongings in storage." "I'm sure they didn't mean any harm," he replied. "Your mother says the place looks great now." It was like I'd stepped into some parallel universe where property rights didn't exist, and family members could appropriate your home on a whim. Just then, Jake emerged from the bedroom again, now fully dressed. "Everything cool out here?" he asked Amanda. "Everything's fine, babe," she reassured him. I turned to my mother. "And who exactly is this? You approved a stranger living in my apartment too?" "Jake is Amanda's boyfriend," my mother explained, as if I was being unreasonable. "They've been together for 3 months. He's in between jobs right now, but he's got some really promising interviews lined up." I later learned that Jake had been evicted from his last 2 apartments for non-payment of rent, a detail my sister and mother had conveniently omitted. As the night wore on, the true extent of their entitled thinking became clear. They genuinely believed they had done nothing wrong. In fact, they expected me to be grateful for the improvements they'd made to my property. "We increased the value," my mother insisted. "That carpet alone cost $3,000. I didn't want carpet. I refinished those hardwood floors myself." "Well, the carpet is much nicer," she sniffed. "More modern." Around 2 in the morning, several of Amanda's friends arrived, clearly coming from a night out. They walked in using keys they somehow had, looking surprised to see me. "Oh," a young woman with bright purple hair said, "Is this your brother? The one whose apartment you're staying at?" "This is my apartment," I corrected immediately. "I own it." The friend looked confused. But Amanda said you gave it to her while you moved in with your girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. This was a complete fabrication. As the night progressed into early morning, I discovered more disturbing details. Amanda had told the building management that she was my sister who would be taking over the lease while I relocated. She had started receiving mail at my address immediately after I left for Hawaii. She had introduced Jake to the neighbors as her boyfriend, who lives here now. The most devastating discovery came when I checked the storage unit. My home office had been dismantled so carelessly that my computer equipment was damaged. The custom monitors I used for coding were stacked on top of each other without protection, resulting in a cracked screen on one. The standing desk mechanism had been jammed when improperly disassembled. My work materials, including external hard drives with client projects, had been tossed into cardboard boxes without any organization. When I confronted Amanda about the damage, she shrugged. Insurance will cover it, right? By sunrise, I was beyond exhaustion but too angry to sleep. My mother finally suggested that I cool down by staying somewhere else for a few days. You want me to leave my own apartment? I asked in disbelief. Just until we figure things out, she said soothingly. You're too upset right now to be reasonable. That was the last straw. Get out, I said quietly. All of you. Now, Ronald, my mother began, but I cut her off. Get out of my apartment, I shouted, startling everyone into silence. You have 1 hour to pack overnight bags and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police and reporting you for breaking and entering. You can't do that, Amanda protested. I live here now. I've established residency. I have rights. Her words sent a chill through me. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or a misguided attempt to help. This had been a calculated takeover of my property. I checked into a hotel near my office, too exhausted and emotionally drained to fight anymore that night. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent hours researching tenant and property laws in Illinois on my phone. What I discovered was concerning. If Amanda could prove she had established residency, even without my permission, evicting her could require a formal legal process that might take months. Early the next morning, I called my friend Michael, who worked as a real estate attorney at a downtown firm. After explaining the situation, he agreed to meet me for coffee before his workday started. This is actually more common than you'd think, Michael told me as we sat in a corner of the busy cafe. Family members assuming they have rights to property that isn't theirs. The good news is that property law is very clear. The bad news is that your sister may have complicated things by receiving mail and changing utilities. Michael advised me to document everything: the state of the apartment, the damage to my possessions, and every communication with Amanda and my mother. Don't threaten or make demands via text or email, he warned. That could be used against you later. But do keep records of everything they say to you. While scrolling through social media during a break at work, I discovered something that made my blood boil. Amanda had posted photos of a housewarming party in what she captioned as, "My new apartment." The photos showed at least 15 people crowded into my living room, drinking and posing on the new furniture. In one image, someone was standing on my kitchen countertop holding a wine bottle. Even worse, in the comments, Amanda had responded to a friend's compliment about the place with, "Thanks. My brother decided to move, so he let me take over." Needed a total makeover though, lol. This was a blatant lie. I had never agreed to let her take over my apartment, and I certainly hadn't decided to move. I called my childhood friend Taylor, who still kept in touch with many of our old neighborhood friends. He confirmed my suspicions. Amanda had been telling mutual acquaintances that I had generously given her my apartment because I was planning to move in with my girlfriend in the suburbs. Again, a complete fabrication, since I wasn't even dating anyone at the time. That evening, I returned to my apartment, determined to have a calm but firm conversation with Amanda. I had to ring the doorbell to my own home, since they had changed the locks without giving me the new key. Jake answered, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Oh, it's you," he said, making no move to let me in. "I need to speak with Amanda," I said evenly. "She's busy right now." "Let me in, Jake. This is my apartment." He hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. The living room was littered with takeout containers and empty wine bottles from what appeared to have been another gathering the night before. Amanda emerged from my bedroom, wearing a face mask and bathrobe. "What do you want, Ronald?" "We need to talk about this situation," I began calmly. "What you've done is illegal. You can't just take over someone's property without permission." "Mom gave me permission," she countered. "Mom doesn't own this apartment. I do." "Well, you were gone, and I needed a place to stay. Family is supposed to help family. Help doesn't mean stealing," I pointed out. "You could have asked. You could have waited until I returned from vacation. You could have done literally anything other than what you did." The conversation quickly deteriorated. Amanda accused me of being selfish and uncaring about her struggles. "You have everything figured out," she said bitterly. "Perfect job, perfect apartment. Some of us aren't so lucky." "I worked for everything I have," I reminded her. "Nothing was handed to me." "Not all of us can be perfect like Ronald," she mimicked. "Mom's right. You've always been cold and selfish." My mother arrived during this argument, having been called by Amanda. Rather than acknowledging the wrong they had done, she delivered an ultimatum. "Ronald, you need to be more understanding," she said sternly. "Your sister needs help right now, and as her brother, you should share what you have. I raised you better than this." "Share? Mom, she took over my entire home without asking." "That's not sharing, that's stealing." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother sighed. "It's just an apartment, and the improvements we made are gorgeous. You should be thanking us." The next morning I went out to get coffee at the shop down the street, needing a moment of normalcy. When I returned to my building, my key no longer worked at all. They had completely changed the locks. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered, though I could hear movement inside. After 10 minutes, I called Amanda's phone. She declined the call. I texted her that I needed to get into my own home, and she replied, "Maybe come back later. We're busy right now." I was being locked out of the apartment I owned and had paid for with years of hard work. In desperation, I called the police. When 2 officers arrived, they initially viewed the situation as a family dispute rather than a property crime. "Do you have proof of ownership?" one officer asked. Fortunately, I had digital copies of my mortgage documents in my cloud storage, which I pulled up on my phone. Still, the officers seemed reluctant to intervene in what they saw as a civil matter. "If she's been receiving mail here and has established residency, you might need to go through formal eviction procedures," the younger officer explained apologetically. As we stood in the hallway discussing my options, several neighbors passed by, giving me strange looks. I later learned that Amanda had been telling people in the building that I was having mental health issues and might show up making strange claims about the apartment. The situation reached its breaking point when the building manager arrived, having been called by a concerned neighbor who witnessed my confrontation with the police. "Mr. Stevens," he said, addressing me formally, "your sister informed management last week that she would be taking over your unit permanently. She submitted a request to have her name added to the building directory." That was when I realized how calculated this takeover had been. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary arrangement that had gone too far. This was a deliberate attempt to steal my property while I was unable to defend it. That afternoon, I met with Michael at his law office to formulate a strategy. Unlike my family, who had acted impulsively and emotionally, I was determined to respond systematically and legally. "The good news," Michael said after reviewing my documents, "is that the property deed and mortgage are solely in your name. There's no question about ownership." We spent hours gathering evidence and documentation. I pulled up my mortgage statements, property tax records, and utility bills from before Amanda's interference. I showed Michael the social media posts where Amanda claimed I had given her the apartment. I detailed the damages to my property and possessions, with estimated costs for repairs and replacements. "This is more than enough to establish that you never consented to any of this," Michael assured me. Now we need to take formal legal action. First, Michael drafted a formal cease and desist letter on his law firm's letterhead, demanding that Amanda, Jake, and anyone else living in the apartment vacate the premises immediately. The letter detailed the unauthorized entry, the damage to property, and the illegal changing of locks. Second, we contacted the building management company with formal documentation, proving my ownership and explaining the situation. The manager was mortified when he realized he had been misled. "We had no idea," he apologized. "Your sister was very convincing. She said you had decided to move out of state for a job opportunity and had transferred the apartment to her." Third, we drafted formal notices to both the utility companies and the Postal Service, reclaiming my rightful position as the property owner and resident. Finally, Michael helped me prepare documentation for small claims court regarding the damages to my property, which we estimated at over $7,000, including the restoration of the hardwood floors, repainting, and replacement of damaged electronics. With these formal legal processes in motion, I sent the cease and desist letter via courier to my apartment, addressed to both Amanda and Jake, with a copy to my mother at her home. The response was swift and predictable. My mother called, alternating between tears and anger. "How could you involve lawyers in a family matter?" she demanded. "This is so unnecessary and hurtful." "You gave me no choice," I replied calmly. "I asked you to respect my property, and you refused." Amanda's boyfriend, Jake, was the first to crack under the pressure. When faced with the possibility of legal consequences, he quickly distanced himself from the situation. "Look, man, this was all Amanda and your mom's idea," he told me during a phone call. "I just went along with it because I needed a place to stay. I'll be out by tomorrow." True to his word, Jake moved out the next day, taking only his personal belongings and leaving Amanda to deal with the consequences alone. My father, who had initially supported my mother and sister, finally began to see the seriousness of the situation when I forwarded him copies of the legal notices. "I had no idea they had gone this far," he admitted. "Your mother told me they were just helping you renovate while you were away. I never would have supported them changing locks or moving your things to storage." With Jake gone, and my father now understanding the reality of the situation, the balance began to shift. I contacted a contractor to provide estimates for restoring the apartment to its previous condition. The quote came to just over $11,000, including removing the carpet, refinishing the hardwood floors again, repainting all walls, and repairing damage to the kitchen cabinets. I had the contractor email copies of these estimates to both Amanda and my mother, along with a note from Michael explaining that they would be legally responsible for these costs if the matter proceeded to court. The building management, now fully aware of the situation, provided me with a new key to my apartment. However, Michael advised against using it unannounced. "Even though you're the legal owner, barging in could complicate things if Amanda tries to claim tenant rights," he warned. "Let's keep everything formal and documented." Instead, we scheduled an official inspection of the apartment with the building manager present as a witness. Amanda reluctantly agreed to be present as well, though my mother conveniently had another commitment that day. The inspection revealed even more damage than I had initially realized. Water damage had occurred in the bathroom, where they had attempted to install a new shower fixture without proper sealing. The carpet had already developed stains in several areas. Several of my grandfather's vinyl records had been removed from their protective sleeves and were stacked haphazardly in a box, potentially causing warping and scratches that would reduce their value. Throughout the inspection, I maintained a calm, professional demeanor, simply taking notes and photographs, while the building manager documented everything for the official record. Amanda, seeing the methodical documentation of the damage, became increasingly uncomfortable. "This is ridiculous," she finally burst out. "It was just supposed to be a nice surprise. We were trying to help. Destroying someone's property without permission isn't help," I replied evenly. "It's vandalism." After the inspection, Michael prepared formal eviction papers, though he hoped they wouldn't be necessary. Sometimes just seeing the official legal documents is enough to motivate people to comply voluntarily, he explained. He was right. The combination of the detailed damage report, the contractor's estimate, the eviction notice, and Jake's departure finally broke through my sister's entitlement and my mother's denial. 1 week after sending the formal legal notices, I arranged a meeting at Michael's office. I invited Amanda, my mother, and surprisingly, my father agreed to attend as well. Michael provided a conference room with enough space for everyone, and a professional, neutral environment. I arrived early and set up a simple presentation on Michael's laptop, which would be projected onto the wall screen. When my family arrived, they seemed subdued, a stark contrast to their previous righteous indignation. "Thank you all for coming," I began formally. "I've asked you here today because we need to resolve this situation legally and definitively." My mother attempted to interrupt with an emotional appeal. "Ronald, we're family. We shouldn't need lawyers and formal meetings to work things out." Michael smoothly intervened. "Mrs. Stevens, with all due respect, the legal issues here are significant. Your son has asked me to help facilitate a resolution that protects everyone's interests." I proceeded with my presentation, starting with Illinois property law regarding ownership rights. I explained clearly that regardless of family relationships, entering and altering someone's property without explicit permission was illegal. "The fact that I'm related to you doesn't change the law," I pointed out. "If a stranger had done what you did, they would be facing criminal charges for breaking and entering, vandalism, and theft." Next, I showed a series of photographs documenting the changes made to my apartment without permission and the damage caused to my possessions. I included screenshots of Amanda's social media posts, where she claimed I had given her the apartment, alongside text messages between us proving I had never agreed to any such arrangement. The most damning evidence came in the form of text messages between Amanda and my mother that Jake had forwarded to me after moving out. In these exchanges, they had explicitly planned to renovate the apartment while I was away, so that I would have to let Amanda stay upon my return. "It'll be easier to ask forgiveness than permission," my mother had texted. "Once it's done, he won't have the heart to kick her out." When these messages appeared on the screen, my mother's face flushed with embarrassment, and Amanda looked away. I continued methodically, presenting the contractor's estimate for repairs, the replacement costs for my damaged electronics, and a timeline for restoring the apartment to its previous condition. "The total damages amount to $14,327, I concluded. "Additionally, I've lost access to my home for over 2 weeks now, requiring hotel expenses of nearly $2,000. I then explained the legal consequences if we couldn't reach an agreement. If this proceeds to court, you could be liable not only for damages and my legal fees, but potentially for criminal charges as well." My father, who had been silent until this point, finally spoke up. "This has gone too far," he said, looking directly at my mother and sister. "Ronald is right. What you did was wrong, legally and morally." "We were just trying to help Amanda," my mother protested weakly. "By stealing Ronald's home?" my father countered. "That's not help, Barbara. That's entitlement, and it's criminal." Amanda, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the meeting, finally broke her silence. "I didn't think it would be such a big deal," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I really needed a place. And you always have everything so perfect, Ronald. It just seemed fair that you could share some of your good fortune." "I worked for everything I have," I reminded her gently but firmly. "Nothing was handed to me. If you needed help, you could have asked. I would have helped you find an apartment within your budget, or even loaned you money for a security deposit. What I couldn't and wouldn't do is give up my home without consent." After nearly 3 hours of discussion, we reached an agreement. Amanda would vacate the apartment entirely within 72 hours, taking only her personal belongings. My mother would pay for all repairs and restoration to return the apartment to its previous condition. I agreed not to pursue legal action as long as they complied fully with these terms. Michael drafted a formal agreement on the spot, which we all signed. It included specific timelines, payment terms, and consequences for non-compliance. "I never meant to hurt you," my mother said as we prepared to leave. "I really thought I was helping both of you." "I know," I replied. "But helping someone doesn't mean taking from someone else. And it certainly doesn't mean making decisions about my property without my consent." The actual process of Amanda moving out was tense, but orderly. Michael and I were present, along with the building manager, to ensure everything proceeded according to our agreement. Amanda had remarkably few possessions to remove, considering how thoroughly she had taken over the space. As she carried out her last bag, she paused at the door. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't think about how this would make you feel." "That's been the problem all along," I replied. "You didn't think about me at all." The restoration of my apartment took nearly a month. I stayed in a corporate apartment arranged by Michael during this time, adding the cost to the bill my mother had agreed to pay. The contractors removed the white carpet, revealing damage to the hardwood floors that required more extensive refinishing than initially estimated. The pink walls needed multiple coats of primer before they could be returned to my original color choices. Beyond the physical restoration, I faced the deeper challenge of reclaiming my space emotionally. The invasion of my home had left me feeling violated and unsafe in what had once been my sanctuary. I hired a locksmith to change all the locks and install a digital keypad system that wouldn't require physical keys. I added a simple security system with door and window sensors and cameras covering the entryway. No one would enter without my knowledge again. The experience had exposed deep-seated issues in my family dynamics that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. My sister's sense of entitlement, my mother's enabling behavior, and my father's tendency to avoid conflict had created a perfect storm of boundary violations. With the encouragement of a therapist I began seeing, I established clear, firm boundaries with my family for the first time. I made it clear that while I loved them, I would no longer tolerate disrespect of my property or my autonomy. "Love doesn't mean access to everything I have," I explained during a difficult conversation with my mother. "And it certainly doesn't mean you get to make decisions about my life or property without my consent." Surprisingly, my father became an unexpected ally in this boundary-setting process. Having witnessed the extent of the violation and its impact on me, he seemed to develop a new respect for my position. "I should have stepped in sooner," he admitted during one of our newly established monthly dinners. "I always thought staying out of conflicts between you, your sister, and your mother was the right thing to do. I see now that my silence enabled bad behavior." He even offered to help with some of the restoration work, spending 2 weekends helping me reinstall the custom bookshelves that had been removed. As we worked side by side, we had conversations about respect, responsibility, and family that we should have had years earlier. My relationship with Amanda remained strained. She viewed the legal action I had taken as an overreaction and struggled to fully acknowledge the violation. "It was just stuff," she said during one tense phone call. "Family should be more important than things." "It wasn't about the things," I tried to explain. "It was about respect and boundaries. My home is an extension of myself. Violating it was violating me." We agreed to give each other space, perhaps reconnecting when the emotions weren't so raw. My mother's reaction evolved over time. Initially defensive and hurt by what she saw as my excessive response, she gradually began to understand the gravity of what she had done. "I've been thinking a lot about boundaries," she said during a careful lunch meeting 3 months after the incident. "I realize I've never been very good at respecting yours. I always thought I knew what was best for both you and Amanda, and I never stopped to consider that my help might actually be harmful." This acknowledgement, while not erasing the damage done, opened the door to a more honest relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Throughout this process, I was surprised by the support I received from unexpected sources. My neighbors, who had witnessed the chaos of Amanda's takeover, offered help with the restoration. Carlos, who had been watering my plants during my vacation, invited me for dinner and listened without judgment as I processed my feelings about the betrayal. My colleagues at work, who had initially been amused by the crazy family story, became genuinely supportive when they understood the true violation that had occurred. My boss even approved an additional week of remote work when the apartment restoration faced delays. As the physical restoration neared completion, I made some deliberate changes to the space. I didn't simply recreate what had been there before. Instead, I thoughtfully considered each element, keeping what truly mattered to me and changing what no longer served my life. I reinstalled the custom shelving for my grandfather's record collection, but added better lighting to highlight the albums. I repainted my bedroom in a slightly lighter shade of blue that brightened the space while still providing the calming environment I wanted. I upgraded my home office with a more ergonomic setup that better supported my occasional work-from-home days. These changes weren't concessions to Amanda and my mother's unauthorized improvements. They were conscious choices that represented my growth through this challenging experience. The most profound change was invisible but significant. I no longer saw my apartment merely as a possession to be protected, but as a physical manifestation of my boundaries. Every element, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of furniture, represented choices I had made for myself. 6 months after the incident, my apartment was fully restored and improved according to my own vision. I hosted a small gathering of friends who had supported me through the ordeal. As we enjoyed good food and conversation in my reclaimed space, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before the violation. Property isn't just about legal ownership. It's about the right to make choices about your own space, to create an environment that reflects your values and meets your needs. When someone violates that space, they're not just changing physical elements. They're disrespecting your autonomy and personhood. My sister and mother learned a difficult but necessary lesson about respecting boundaries. I learned equally important lessons about establishing and defending those boundaries, even with family. Most importantly, I learned that true family support never comes at the expense of respect for one another's autonomy. As I look around my apartment today, I see more than just a living space. I see a testament to resilience, a physical representation of my values, and a daily reminder that healthy relationships require mutual respect and clear boundaries. Have you ever had family members overstep their boundaries with your property or personal space? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and establishing healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most important boundaries to establish are with the people closest to us.